My name is Emily, and I'm a 28-year-old single woman. I don't work for any company and live at home with my mother and my older sister, Catherine, who is 2 years older than me. Because of this, my family often refers to me as an unemployed trash in my late 20s. At 28, I'm confined to my room. Hey, unemployed trash, pay this month's rent. The person banging on the door and raising her voice is my sister. After graduating from high school, Catherine got a job at a local company. However, she quit. She claimed it was due to terrible juniors. According to the rumors, it seems she was the one bullying the juniors, and that became a problem. Now she sometimes takes up short-term part-time jobs. In other words, she's a part-timer. Catherine often says, "Even though I only work part-time, at least I'm working. You're the unemployed trash who isn't. That means you're the lowest in this house." And that's how she refers to me, as an unemployed trash. By the way, I'm not very good at interacting with people. The reason dates back to my school days. When I was in elementary and middle school, I was often compared to my sister, who's only 2 years older than me. Catherine was the flashy, sociable type, and even her classmates would joke around asking me things like, "Are you really Catherine's younger sister?" It wasn't just because I was more reserved compared to Catherine that these things happened. Catherine loved to tease me by labeling me as a failure, and she would spread rumors about me to her classmates. She was talking to bugs in our garden, or she locks herself in her room and reads strange books all the time, probably the kind that nerds read. She spread stories about me, both true and false. I believe I wouldn't have been so introverted if it weren't for Catherine. Because of Catherine's rumors and influence, I was gradually labeled as a nerd or geek, and eventually I began to fit those labels. I started avoiding kids at school. I didn't join any clubs. I never hung out with friends, and as soon as classes ended, I'd rush straight home. The time before Catherine came home was the only time I felt at peace, because I knew I'd be teased again when she returned. I had hobbies, so I'd immerse myself in them to escape reality. My mother would scold me for that behavior. "If you continue like this, you won't be able to make it in society." That was my mother's favorite phrase. And her next line would always be, "You should take Catherine as an example." I couldn't possibly emulate Catherine, who cornered me nearly every day. By the way, my mother was a stay-at-home mom and had never worked in society. My mother divorced my father when I was still very young. When my father was around, my mother, Catherine, and I had a better relationship than we do now. However, after the divorce, both of them began directing their negative emotions towards me. It seemed the reason was that I resembled my father. My mother doted on Catherine, who resembled her. She would throw away things I bought with my saved allowance, while Catherine would get expensive birthday gifts, and I'd just receive candy. Both my mother and Catherine would say, "Everything we do is for Emily's sake. We're just trying to encourage her to be a brighter child." But to me, they were merely justifying their actions. In reality, it was not my mother but my father who earned the money for our living expenses and money to raise us children. Even though he no longer lived with us, he made sure to transfer enough money so that Catherine and I didn't struggle financially. I contacted my father secretly without letting my mother know. My father and I kept in touch occasionally. When it came time to choose a high school, he told me, "Go to the school you want, Emily. I'll pay for it." He seemed to have persuaded my mother later on. Thanks to him, I was able to attend the high school I wanted, but my mother became even stricter with me, seemingly displeased that I had gone through my father. She would complain loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, "It's tough having an incompetent daughter," or "It's strange how Catherine is so responsible." Over time, I had mostly stopped talking to my mother about myself or my future. Based on past experiences of being dismissed, I believed it would be futile to share. and I decided it would be better to handle things on my own. My mother held a grudge because I had once tattled to my father, and her response was merely, "Once you turn 18, do whatever you want." Thus, as time passed with my mother and Catherine unaware of what I was doing, both my sister and I grew up. Despite everything, I wished for reconciliation with my mother and Catherine. Our bond weakened due to the divorce, but I held on to the hope that even a small gesture could mend things. Every year I picked out gifts and celebrated Catherine's birthday. "What's this? Such poor taste." Sometimes Catherine would say things like that to me. I tried cooking meals in the kitchen. However, my mother told me, "This isn't edible. Don't do it again." No matter what I did, I couldn't improve my relationship with the two of them. This went on for many years, and I began eating out more often. "How can you afford such luxuries? Where are you getting the money?" Although my mother scolded me this way, I dodged her questions by saying, "I have a part-time job." After turning 22, I started paying rent. My father's financial support ended, Catherine quit her job, and both she and my mother had no income. Their harassment intensified, perhaps due to financial insecurity, and I began being charged $500 a month for rent and food expenses. Catherine, on the other hand, wasn't paying anything. While it's true she used a room in the house, we never ate together and lived separately under the same roof. Still, I decided to pay. I thought, my family is in trouble. I have to help. However, I was shocked to discover something. Apart from me, my mother was asking her own parents for a monthly allowance of $4,000. I was close with my grandparents, so they consulted with me about the allowance. I was shocked to discover that my mother was demanding such a large sum every month. My grandparents are elderly and not working anymore. There's no way they could afford to pay that amount monthly. I asked my grandparents to send the $4,000 I'd give them to my mother on my behalf. I then apologized for burdening them with my mother's demands. While my grandparents looked apologetic, they told me, "Don't worry about the money." There's a reason I chose not to give the money directly to my mother. I feared she would take advantage if she knew I had money. I hoped that with Catherine finding a new job and the financial concerns being alleviated, they'd return to how they once were. Holding on to that hope, I continued to pay a total of $4,500. "By the way, Mom and I are moving to a new apartment soon." My mother was smirking on the side. "Which new apartment?" I hesitantly asked. What Catherine proudly presented was a brochure of a luxury high-rise apartment. "Here, it's amazing, isn't it?" The location, amenities, and view were indeed top-notch. It was amazing, but I couldn't comprehend who was going to pay for it or why they were moving there. After all, Catherine works part-time jobs. As I was staring at the brochure lost in thought, Catherine mentioned, "I might let you live there too." "Me too?" "You're an unemployed trash who can't do anything without us, right? If you really insist, I'm saying I might let you live there." "What will happen to this house?" "We'll start the selling process and put it on the market within a month." Setting aside Catherine's annoying comments, I had been feeling that our current house was a bit cramped. It might still sell, but it's a bit old. Whether the condo Catherine showed was worth the price needed to be evaluated, but the idea of acquiring a high-value property now did cross my mind. I decided to consult with a friend knowledgeable about real estate investments about the condo. He's a friend from my student days. His comment, "I think it's a decent property," became the deciding factor for me. Later on, I informed my mother and Catherine. "I'm thinking of moving into the condo." My mother and Catherine exchanged glances and smirked. They must have been thrilled, as from the beginning they had probably intended for me to pay the rent. "Then we need to start the paperwork immediately," my mother said cheerfully. You, the shut-in, can use this as practice to go out. Go handle it, Catherine said to me. I had planned to go anyway, so I didn't retort. I immediately contacted the real estate agency, went to their office, and proceeded with the purchase, not the rent. When I returned home and informed them that I've completed the procedures, both my mother or Catherine cheered out loud. I hurriedly headed to my room to escape the noisy pair. A few days before the scheduled moving day, there was a note on the boxes containing my belongings reading, "No need to transport." Hey, what's this about? I asked my mother and Catherine. They had finished their preparations and were leisurely drinking tea. It's your stuff, right? It's something off? Catherine pretended not to understand on purpose. Oh, we're moving tomorrow, right? What are you talking about? Only Mom and I are moving to the condo. Plus, we've decided to sell this house. You need to leave ASAP. We're leaving you behind because you're bad luck. Realize you can't be unemployed forever. Stand on your own 2 feet. My mother also made some nasty remarks. I see. I simply responded and returned to my room. On the moving day, my mother and Catherine's belongings were being rapidly taken out. They were very excited and bragged to the movers. We're moving to a condo. The night view is amazing. Of course, they completely ignored me. I stayed in my room focusing on my own work. A few hours later, I was bombarded with calls from my mother and Catherine. Hello? Hey, unemployed trash. What's going on? They told us the contract isn't set up. Emily, didn't you handle the paperwork? I thought you could at least manage that, you useless piece of junk. The shouting was so loud I instinctively moved the phone away from my ear. Well, I did expect something like this. I did handle the paperwork. What do you mean? They told us we aren't the current leaseholders. Catherine's voice was high-pitched and piercing. I did handle it. I didn't rent, I bought it. But since only Mom and you were supposed to live there, I sold it. Bought? Sold? That's right. The day they told me I couldn't move with them, I sold the apartment. It was a bit of a hassle, but I didn't want to pay for a home that only they would live in. It sounded like the two were arguing over the phone. I said to them, "Why don't the two of you just renegotiate the contract?" My naive sister suggested. Right, Mom, let's just contract it again for us. We can make Emily pay us back later. Yes, let's do that. It seemed Mother agreed. The phone abruptly hung up. A few hours later, the phone rang again with Catherine's shrill voice. You schemed something, didn't you? What are you talking about? They said we can't sign a contract. I figured as much. I asked them. You can't? Why? I don't know. They said something technical. Something about not having enough credit or something. Catherine isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. She probably doesn't understand the term credit. That means they don't trust you to sign a contract. I explained slowly as teaching to kids. What? I don't get this credibility thing. That means they don't trust you to sign a contract. It's about social credibility. You often claim to be a part-timer but barely work, making you pretty much an unemployed trash. They won't lease to someone like that. Why could you, an unemployed trash, sign it and not me? Something's fishy. You must have rigged something. This conversation was getting nowhere. I decided it was time to explain clearly why I was able to purchase the apartment. Listen, Catherine, and Mom, are you listening too? You remember I went to an art school? Despite Mom being against it because it was far away, I've always been drawing, and I won a national competition in high school. My achievements were recognized, and I got a scholarship to attend the famous art university. Neither of you knew, did you? I never told you guys. I'm still drawing, using Dad's room for it. The monthly rent of $4,000 might seem high, but I felt it was okay given the hassle of moving. Oh, I'll send you the link to my portfolio website. I sent the link of my creator profile to both Catherine's and Mom's phones. This site showcased my achievements and past works. There's also a contact form for potential buyers of my artwork. I'm not an unemployed trash. I've been investing my income as well. I think my annual income is on par with business owners. My income is leagues ahead of yours, Catherine, who claims to be a part-timer. That's why I have credibility. What? You're lying. Stop making things up. Catherine's voice was faint and incredulous. Art University? Artworks? I could faintly hear my mother's voice. I've never been particularly good at interacting with people. However, I've always had a keen interest in art and paintings. I started to find joy in drawing objects around the house, replicating plants and copying insects. The art book that my father secretly bought for me on my birthday is a treasured item. To my unsophisticated sister, Catherine, it probably looked like something a nerd would read. Being a successful artist, I, of course, don't work for a company. To my mother and Catherine, I probably appeared as an unemployed recluse, an unemployed trash. After all, they've never shown any interest in me before. They have no clue about the real me. I don't know or care if you're some great person, but I won't forgive you for betraying Mom and me. I was even impressed that they could pick a fight at this moment. You're selling the house within this month, right? What? Selling it. That's what you and Catherine decided, right? To kick me out. I could tell over the phone that both my mother and Catherine was speechless. I've already moved, as told, to one of the apartments I had invested in. I heard my mother and Catherine starting to panic on the other end, saying things like, "This is bad. We have to cancel the sale." After they removed their belongings, I had another moving company take out the rest. I'm already relaxing in my new place. Sipping my coffee, I remarked, "Looks like you two might end up homeless. Hope you can cancel the sale in time." "How much more will you mock your family to feel satisfied?" Hearing her say that for the first time, I shouted back in anger. That's my line. I don't expect them to understand how I've felt all these years being treated as the lowest in the family. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. There are so many things I couldn't do because of Catherine, many things I resented her for, but I believe the path I chose was right. Through art, I've made many friends and acquaintances. And then I'm engaged. I'll be living in my new home with my fiancé, so there's no room for you two. Please enjoy living without the nuisances," I declared, and hung up. "Are you okay?" The one cautiously asking from behind was my husband. He seemed surprised because I rarely raise my voice. "Yeah, I'm fine. They're like parasites, so they'll figure things out even without me. I've given up on my sister in her 30s who's jobless, and my mother in her 40s who's the same. They somehow managed to cancel the sale of the house and moved back in. I lost all reasons and the willingness to pay them rent or the $4,000, so I stopped all financial support. It seems my penniless mother turned to my grandparents again. "Emily did something terrible. She's the worst. It's all because of her that we don't have money." That's what she seemed to have claimed. She probably thought things would work out if she just acted spoiled as always. However, my grandparents were furious when they heard the whole story from me. "Shameless." "The one who's truly awful is you, isn't it? How could you treat Emily like that? All these years, mocking her, demanding her money, treating her like a nuisance. Unbelievable. You deserve to be abandoned." My mother lost trust even from her own relatives. Catherine tried to get a job again, but it seems she's struggling. It had been years since she last worked. She occasionally called me. "Emily, I realize I was wrong too. Let's put that behind us. Can you introduce me to a job, or maybe a man who can be my husband? I was wrong too. What does she mean by I was wrong too? As expected, Catherine never changes. Asking for a job is one thing, but including a husband in the mix? She's clearly looking to leech off someone. Sorry, I don't think I know of any jobs or men that would be a match for you. Me, she's too much to handle. Oh, well, let me know if you find any. Does Catherine think a prince will come to whisk her away? She's already 30 yet, still so immature. In this respect, Catherine and my mother are so alike. The reason my mother divorced my father was because she solely depended on his income without doing anything herself. My father, having a job with frequent overseas assignments, found it challenging to raise children, so he had no choice but to entrust their custody to my mother. He told my mother to raise us properly since he was providing ample child support. As a result, while my mother doted on Catherine, it seemed she grew to resent me, who took after my father. And now even I have turned my back on my mother. If Catherine ever gets married, I can already foresee a similar future for her. I'm glad. I couldn't help but let those words slip. About what? My husband asks. That I didn't turn out like Catherine. With a kind husband and a fulfilling life and a job, I have things that neither my mother nor Catherine possess, especially considering I grew up being treated poorly by both of them. Oh, let me introduce her. This is my girlfriend, Emily, Tom said with a smile, and the woman beside him greeted everyone. Nice to meet you all. Your girlfriend? I was in shock, but Tom casually responded. All right, I haven't told you. I'm going to marry Emily, so I want a divorce. What? I was too stunned to speak. I realized my parents were right. Being with an older woman like you is getting tough. Emily is young, she's 23. New houses and women are always better, right? Right. Emily nodded in agreement. And about the accident you mentioned, it's no big deal, right? You broke a bone, and now you're slacking off at home? We'll take the house once we divorce. I was so shocked by his outrageous comments that I forgot to get angry. It was impossible to continue the conversation. Taking a deep breath, I presented a signed divorce document and said, Okay, here's the divorce papers. Oh, you're well prepared. Leaving the jubilant couple behind, I began preparing to leave the house immediately. As I was packing, Tom spoke up. You have nowhere to go, right? There's an apartment near the station with a rent of $100. It's old and has cracks in the walls, though. Tom, that's so mean. The two of them laughed ignorantly. I didn't respond and slammed the front door. Let them laugh. I have places to go. Places they could never imagine. My name is Catherine White. I'm turning 40 this year. I married Tom, who is 35 now, 3 years ago. We don't have kids and live together in the house I bought when I was single. It's second-hand, but it's refurbished and quite clean. Why did I buy a house before getting married? It goes back to my childhood. We were poor because my father was gone. To be precise, he disappeared before I could remember him. I lived with my mother, who loved me deeply, but life was tough with just the two of us. Still, having my mother was enough. But during my high school years, she passed away due to an illness. It was devastating. But I had no time to mourn. I had to survive on my own. After graduating from high school, I started working at a small advertising agency. I worked tirelessly in sales. In my 30s, I was so dedicated to work that I never imagined I'd marry. But I wanted a place to call my own. So I saved up and bought a cheap house. I had to take out a loan, but I paid it off early. Around that time, I met Tom. He was from a client company. Tom seemed unreliable to me since he was 5 years younger, but he admired my work ethic. We started seeing each other. It was surprising, but also delightful. I had never had anyone openly express their feelings for me before. We started dating and quickly got married. At first, Tom's parents disapproved of our marriage. I was older, and they knew I had no family. But Tom defended me, saying, "Even if she has no parents, Catherine works hard. Don't say such things." I was genuinely happy. I thought we could make it work, but that changed. The shift in Tom's behavior began less than 6 months after we moved in together. One evening, after returning from work, he sat down at the dining table. Dinner was meat and potatoes, a salad, and eggplant soup. After eating for a while, Tom stopped. What's wrong? I've been meaning to say this. This soup, it's from this morning, right? I don't like leftovers. Can you make a fresh one for dinner? But it takes time. I also work, and I might not make it in time. Sorry, but that sounds like an excuse. My mother always made different soups for breakfast and dinner, and there should be at least 5 side dishes. Can you do that? I was taken aback by the sudden situation. I felt this way for a while, but kept it to myself. While I'm not great at cooking, it's hard to do intricate dishes while working too. Your mother is a full-time housewife, right? I work and can't cook that much. That's why you shouldn't make excuses. It's expected of a housewife. You should at least do that much. I was frustrated by Tom's outdated views, but I held back my words to avoid worsening the mood. Though I was discontent, I wanted to avoid arguments. I started finishing work on time and rushing home to cook. But Tom's actions and words became increasingly demanding. Did you use cheap meat for this? This side dish is the same as yesterday. Please space them out at least a week. With each of his complaints, the time I spent cooking became more overwhelming. Before I knew it, I spent all day thinking about meals. Tom's nitpicking didn't stop at just food. He checked every corner of the house for dust and criticized my cleaning. If you have so many complaints, why don't you do it yourself? What are you saying? Housework isn't my job? Don't shift the responsibility. Maybe you can't handle chores because you don't have parents around. I was stunned by his words. He had never belittled me for not having parents around before. Was this Tom's true nature? Had the Tom I knew before been an illusion? Regardless, I wished for the old Tom to return, but the situation only worsened. With Tom's endless demands, I was completely drained. Balancing work seemed impossible. On Tom's suggestion, I decided to quit my job. I had loved this job since graduating from high school, but it seemed there was no choice. Looking back, maybe I should have left him then. But I had prioritized work over romance before, and didn't know what a normal family looked like. I thought perhaps meeting Tom's demands was a housewife's duty. Maybe all I had to do was bear it a bit to maintain a peaceful home. Now that I was a full-time housewife, I had much more time for housework. Tom's complaints decreased, and I was genuinely relieved. I thought the problem was solved, but my friend's new house is so spacious and beautiful. The furniture was designed by famous designers, and appliances are all luxury items. Oh, really? I casually responded and handed Tom a glass of water. But compared to that, our second-hand house is a bit lacking. I wish we could at least replace this cheap furniture. Cheap? The furniture and appliances were from my single base, but they're still in good condition. They weren't luxury items, but they weren't cheap either. Moreover, when Tom moved in, he had said, "Let's keep using these appliances and furniture." Even though I pointed that out. But honestly, after living with it, I feel new furniture would be better, he said without any hesitation. Even if you say that, the current ones are still usable. It's a waste to replace them. I softly pointed that out, and Tom suddenly looked at me with a mocking expression. That's the frugal side of you. I wonder if you're just naturally stingy. What? Why would you say that? Anyway, I've quit my job, so we don't have that kind of money. You quit your job because you wanted to, didn't you? But you... Yeah, it's always my fault, he muttered dismissively, and then staggered off to the bedroom. How could he say such things? Anger started to boil within me, but then I thought, maybe he's just drunk. He's just being blamed because he's drunk. Don't mind. However, even when he's sober, Tom's attitude was getting worse. Our conversations became more hostile, and every time he spoke, it was to complain about me. What on earth happened to him? And then, without telling me, Tom went ahead and bought new furniture. On top of that, it seems he also got new golf equipment. He looked at the golf clubs with satisfaction, clearly pleased with himself. Tom has a regular job, but he doesn't earn much. He probably took out a loan. Now that I can't work, I'm worried about repaying it. Anxiety grew in my heart. Then an unexpected event occurred. As usual, I was on my way to the supermarket to buy ingredients for dinner. As I was walking on the road, suddenly a loud horn blared from behind. Immediately after, I felt a huge impact, and then darkness consumed my consciousness. When I came to, I was staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. It seemed that I was lying down. I felt pain everywhere and couldn't move. What happened to me? Oh, Miss White, have you awakened? Where am I? You're in the hospital. You were brought in after a traffic accident. Traffic accident? I remember leaving the house, but I don't remember anything after that. I moved my head. The impersonal bed, the attached IV drip, and the woman in a nurse's uniform. Was this really a hospital? When I looked outside, it was already dark. I left the house around 2 p.m., so a lot of time had passed. Later, a doctor came and briefly explained the situation. It seems I was hit by a car that was not paying attention while on my way to the supermarket. I didn't have life-threatening injuries, but I had several fractures and needed to be hospitalized for a while. I never imagined I'd be in a traffic accident. After receiving an explanation about the hospitalization, the nurse spoke up. "We've contacted your husband, but..." From her hesitant expression, I had a bad premonition. I immediately called Tom. Hello, Tom? Yeah, Catherine, I got a call from the hospital. You had an accident? You're so clumsy. Come home quickly and make dinner. What? I'm going to be hospitalized from now on. I couldn't understand what he was saying. As I retorted, Tom shouted back. Then what about the housework? What are you saying? Is the housework more important than me? Unbelievable. He was more concerned about housework than his wife's condition. I found myself becoming increasingly angry, and it soon turned into a quarrel. Arguing any further would be pointless. I hung up the phone, still frustrated. Lately, Tom has been more harsh in his words, but I never realized he could be this cold. That day, I was filled with anger and physical pain, making it hard to sleep. But as the days went by, my strength gradually returned. Thus, I started rehabilitation. Having been bedridden for some time, initially moving was tough, but it became surprisingly enjoyable as I got used to it. Lying in bed, I often found myself lost in thought, so rehab was a welcome distraction. However, since that incident, I haven't heard from Tom. I thought talking would just anger me, so I ignored him. Around that time, I occasionally passed an elderly man in the hallway. He was well dressed, so he wasn't a patient. I assumed he was visiting someone and didn't give it much thought, but he seemed to be looking my way. Are you Catherine White? Yes, I am. What can I do for you? I answered cautiously. At that time, I had no idea that this man would change my fate. Eventually, after about a month in the hospital, I was discharged. I hadn't fully recovered, but I was told outpatient care would suffice. I was finally going home. After a month away, my home felt oddly nostalgic. But that feeling was short-lived. The moment I opened the door, I felt something was off. There were unfamiliar shoes, heels with flashy pink ribbons. Could it be? Rushing into the living room, I noticed the entire house had changed. Not just the furniture, but even the electronics had been replaced with brand new high-end models. The curtains were different too, making it feel like someone else's house. "Ah, Catherine, you've been discharged?" Tom, emerging from the back, said casually. Next to him was a young woman. The woman with brown hair and wearing a revealing outfit spoke lazily. "Welcome back. Um, who are you?" I was stunned, and Tom showed a smile. "Oh, let me introduce you. This is my girlfriend, Emily. Nice to meet you." "Your girlfriend?" "Yeah, I guess I never mentioned it. I'm planning to marry Emily, so I want a divorce." What? I was at a loss for words. I've come to realize that what my parents said was right. Without proper parents, you can't manage household chores or finances properly. I thought you being older would be reliable, but living with an aunt has become tough. Emily's young, just 23. New homes and women are always better, right? Right? Emily tilted her head in agreement. "And that accident of yours wasn't a big deal, right? Breaking a bone and then slacking on housework deserves a divorce." "We'll be taking the house, by the way." Such outrageous statements left me too stunned to even get angry. Don't get me wrong, we're planning to buy a new house eventually, but this place is just a temporary one until then. When they say something as unreasonable as this, I lose all desire to even converse with them. The old Tom is gone. I've come to think of him as a monster, not a human with whom I cannot communicate. I shouldn't fight on the same level with him. I took a deep breath and presented a document saying, "Okay, here's the divorce paper." "Oh, you're well prepared." I had already signed the divorce paper in advance. Considering the recent strange atmosphere, I thought this choice might come up eventually. I quickly started packing my stuff. I needed to prepare to leave the house. As I was busy, Tom spoke to me. "You don't have anywhere to go, right? There's an apartment near the station that rents for $100. It's run down and has cracks in the walls though." "Tom, that's so mean." Ignoring their mocking laughter, I slammed the front door with force. I took a moment to look back at the house, the castle that I worked hard to buy. Today is the last day I'll see it, but I had no regrets. I have a place to go. A week later, while relaxing in my new place, the doorbell rang loudly. Checking the monitor, it was Tom and Emily. Ignoring them, they kept shouting my name. Their frenzied state made me want to laugh. After observing for a while, I spoke over the intercom. "What do you want?" "Why are you living in such a mansion?" Yes, the mansion Tom referred to is where I currently live. A 3-story building made of reinforced concrete on a massive lot, complete with a swimming pool. "You came all the way here just to say that?" "No, I have a proposal. Open up. I want to talk face to face." "It's probably just nonsense." "No, it's important." Annoyed with Tom's persistence, I thought, this is the last time, and opened the door. I led them to the living room. I had been in touch with Tom about the change of house ownership, but I never told him where I lived. When I asked how he found out, it seems he coincidentally saw me in town and followed me. He was expecting to see me entering a shabby apartment, but was shocked to see me entering this mansion. Tom, along with Emily, had concocted a bold plan. "Tell me, are you living in this mansion because of some shady job?" "What? Why?" I was taken aback by Tom's absurd claim. "I saw you. You were with an old man entering this house." "Look, I get it. You don't want to admit it. You're poor, so you had to find that kind of work, right? But if you have such a wealthy client, I want you to introduce him to Emily. I work in a cabaret club, so I'm good at charming older men. I'm sure I can earn more than you, Captain." "What are you both talking about? The man you saw me with is probably my father. This house is also my father's house." "What? That's a lie. You don't have parents." Perhaps noticing Tom's loud voice, the door to the reception room opened. "What's all the noise about?" Seeing the middle-aged man who emerged, I called out to him, "Dad! Wait, Dad?" My father, surprised, sat next to me and greeted Tom. "Ah, you must be Tom? My daughter spoke of you before." "Nice to meet you. I'm Catherine's father, Robert Johnson." "Wait, what's going on?" Tom looked back and forth between me and my father, his eyes wide with surprise. "It's understandable. I only recently reunited with my father while I was in the hospital. Yes, the middle-aged man who spoke to me that day was my father. My father was supposed to have disappeared. I had been told so by my mother, and I thought there might have been a mistake. But after speaking with this man, I realized he was my real father. To start a business, my father went to America. After a while, once his business was on track, he planned to bring us over. But he was robbed there, losing everything. He lost all his investment capital, and even his means of communication was cut off. Stranded, he fortunately met a man who offered him a job at his company. Starting with menial tasks, he gradually got promoted and eventually became the right-hand man to the company's CEO. With the help of this man, he later started his own business. The business was successful, and my father achieved social success. But he was always concerned about my mother and me. He felt guilty for leaving us for so long and found it hard to return. Then his company decided to start a new venture in Japan. After much thought, he decided to come back. He built a house here and started looking for me and my mother. He then discovered that my mother had passed away and was deeply regretful. If only he had come back sooner. Wishing to see me as soon as possible, he visited me in the hospital. Learning the truth, I ended up living in this mansion owned by my father. I briefly explained all this. By the way, my father had also looked into Tom's affair. After occasional golf with colleagues, Tom would go to a hostess club where he met Emily, a hostess. So this is my family home. Understand? Never heard about you having a rich father all of a sudden, Tom murmured in a weak voice. So, if you have so much money, will you come to the club where I work? Emily quickly tried to hand her business card to my father. True to the type of woman Tom would choose, she was incredibly bold. But my father stopped her immediately. I'm sorry, but I make it a point not to visit cheap imitation bars. What? Emily was speechless. Naturally. My father frequented some establishments for work, but only the finest, high-end places. He would never go to a cheap club like where Emily works. Besides, I don't have money. Catherine inherited everything already. What? To the puzzled expressions of Tom and Emily, my father casually replied, Around $800 million. It's the least I can do to make up for leaving her alone all this time. The two of them were dumbfounded, their mouths agape. I've heard about you two from Catherine, especially you, Tom. You said some pretty horrible things to Catherine. She worked hard, scrimping and saving from her meager salary to buy that house. She also did her best with household chores. Having no mother, she probably didn't get a chance to learn from anyone, yet you disparaged her and trampled on her feelings. I can't forgive you, especially when you cheated on her while you were married. If it comes to that, I can sue you, but I won't. Catherine's struggles were partly my fault too. You mocked me for being poor and for not having parents. I'm fed up with someone like you who lacks compassion. Never come back to this house again. Goodbye. Is there anything else you need? If you're done, can you leave? Ah, help! Tom and Emily screamed and ran away. Watching them, Dad and I shared a laugh. It's been a while since I laughed this much. I probably won't see those two again. I can finally live peaceful days. I was deeply relieved. I found out later that their subsequent fate was pitiable. A typhoon came to the region where Tom and Emily continued to live. With heavy rain, houses were flooded from the overflowing river. Thankfully, my area wasn't affected, but their house suffered severe damage. Tom and Emily fled, but their expensive furniture, brand new golf equipment, and Emily's luxury items were all waterlogged. The pillars of the house had rotted from being soaked in water for so long. Without a place to stay, the two seemed to live in shelters for a while. Tom's family home was far away, and Emily's family situation was worse. Emily's parents were gambling addicts, living on welfare in a tiny apartment. Emily, who worked at a nightclub, spent all her money. Tom was also in debt from buying expensive things. Tom, who relied on women for money, was now in trouble. The two, having no other options, had to move into a cheap apartment near the station that he had told me about. It's ironic that Tom, who once made fun of others, ended up living there. What you do to others will come back to you. Unless they truly repent, they won't find peace. Meanwhile, I was thinking of job hunting since I had left my previous company. When I talked to my father about this, I was able to join his company. The job is in sales like before, and it's fulfilling. I'm still learning, but I work hard every day to be valuable. At my father's mansion, we often host home parties for business associates. My sales experience helps, and I can talk freely with anyone. I plan to work abroad in the future, so I'm also studying English. My father often tells me, "You look livelier now compared to when we reunited." It feels like a lie that I used to be so irritated every day when I was with Tom. Life is unpredictable. Even if times are tough, they won't last forever. If you keep looking forward, someone will always be watching over you. I believe that, and I want to keep living brightly.
Your belly is so huge. You don't turn it on anymore. Raise the kids yourself. While looking at my pregnant belly, James made a shocking remark. Given an unreasonable reason for divorce, I felt as if I was left abandoned on the streets. However, a miracle then happened to me. Fine, here the divorce papers. I had a good reason to accept the divorce. 3 months later, I got frantic calls from him. My name is Catherine, just an ordinary office worker. My life in the past has never been extraordinary, and I have been leading a rather ordinary life. Now it feels like my life is at a peak. Catherine, will you support me? I got married to James, who was my boss. He worked in sales at a major general trading company. We began dating when I was 27. At first, I just thought of him as a reliable senior at work and didn't pay him any special attention. But when I attended a drinking party with him, I quickly realized he was a dependable man. He's considerate and has a lot of respect from others. He's very passionate about his work, and I was honestly amazed every day by his sales techniques. Although I could be considerate, I was very bad at expressing my opinions to others. It took me several years for me to be able to speak my mind. James passionately coached me, and I naturally got attracted to his enthusiasm. And perhaps he noticed my feelings for him because he started to approach me more frequently. Right after he was promoted to section chief, we began our relationship. A year into our relationship, he proposed to me. Today, we've finally made it to the finish line. Honestly, I felt elated, as if I was ascending to heaven. In my life, this was probably the first time I've felt so overjoyed. Having had no romantic experiences, let alone serious relationship with men, I thought falling in love with James was pure destiny. That is, until things took a turn for the worse.
A year after marrying James, I was carrying a new life inside me. I left the hospital excited, wondering how James would react. But when I told him about a pregnancy, his response was devastatingly unexpected. "You're pregnant?" He showed utter inconvenience, perfectly mirroring his words. "Didn't you marry me to support my life? Weren't you on birth control pills?" I was shocked. As we were building our life after marriage, I had always wanted children. I thought James would be just as happy. But the reality was the exact opposite. James never wanted kids. He saw me as a housemaid. I realized this during our discussion about my pregnancy. "Birth control? You never mentioned anything about birth control." His words were too cruel. I couldn't help but become emotional and snap back. At that moment, a heavy sigh escaped from James' lips. "You just don't get it. You're trash. You just don't get it. You're trash. You used to work for me and you can't even assume that. Doing what's not being told is the basic of being an adult. Is your brain too hollow to understand that?" Saying this, he tapped my head with his index finger. The force and emphasis of his words made me feel his frustration and disgust. I was supposed to be happy about this news. Why did he even marry me? As I thought this, he revealed another shocking truth. "I thought you could at least handle the household chores when I married you. I might consider getting a divorce." His words, which felt almost like a threat, deeply wounded my heart. Overwhelmed by sadness and unable to speak, James, with a smirk, added, "Before I married you, I was actually thinking of hiring a maid. I really hate doing household chores. But you liked me, didn't you? You never went against my opinions, and I heard you were good at household tasks. I thought it would be a win-win situation for both of us. It seems like you fooled me." His unbelievable words made me sadder than angry. Fearful of showing my tears, I bit my lip hard, trying to distract myself with the pain. "I never wanted a child with you. Who asked for you to get pregnant? You should have taken birth control as you were told. That's on you." My heart was filled with regret that I married him. Of course, he later demanded that I get an abortion, but I firmly refused that request. Until I could find a way to support myself, I had no choice but to do as he said. I begged him, pressing my head to the ground, pleading for the sake of our child. As a result, I was by his side, but only as a housemaid. I was his wife in name only. In exchange for not being involved as a couple, I was allowed to give birth to the child. "I'll provide the money, but I won't take care of the kid at all. You're on your own with that." His words, cold as if he was pushing the responsibility of a pet onto me, pierced through my heart. I had quit my job when I married him because of his request. If I returned to my previous job, I would have to see James every day after our divorce. I absolutely couldn't stand that. Until I find a new job and secure stable income, I must endure this life. With those thoughts, I felt despair every day. "If you take care of the house properly, I'll work outside. All you need to do is be thorough with the household chores." I was aware that he was bad at household chores, even when we were dating. I naively thought he was relying on me. Perhaps this was one of the reasons he wanted to marry me. No matter how much emotional abuse I endured from him, I can't escape him. Especially now that we have a child. Leaving him, who has an above average income, would mean plugging into poverty. Which is better, to have a child live in poverty or live in a house with no love. When faced with this harsh binary choice, another tragedy befell me. It was the news of my parents' death. After getting married, I could only see my parents about once a year. The only time I was allowed to return home was during the 3 days he was away on a business trip. If you leave the house, what am I supposed to eat? I couldn't just leave him. Food says such self-centered things. Hence, those rare trips home were the few pleasures in my life, a reward for my daily hard work. I was planning to report about my child as the only filial duty I could offer, but even that was taken away from me. I felt like I had hit rock bottom in my life. A while later, I received an email letter. I didn't recognize the sender and, feeling a bit uneasy, I opened it to find its shocking content. If you receive this letter, please contact me anytime. Along with the message was the sender's phone number and a photo. Seeing that picture made me believe the content of the letter was true. I immediately called the number written in the letter. While crying, I explained everything and decided to meet them. You want to see your relatives? With your status as a housemaid, how can you be so selfish? What about my meals during that time? Please, I need to deal with my parents' affair and go through procedures. I haven't even properly informed them about our child. They are asking to see me just this once. I don't have money to fund your outings. If you go, pay with your own money. I was constantly bombarded with cold, hurtful words. However, they no longer had the power to hurt me. He's nagging again. My heart had become so numb that I could simply ignore his words. But for some reason, James, who was usually so harsh, suddenly brightened up as if he had an idea. Wait a second. I just remembered I have a business trip then. You can go home for about 3 days. Just come back before I return. That's unusual. It was unlike James to give me such freedom. But the reason for this sudden leniency would become clear later on. Having received James' permission, I returned to my hometown and met the sender of the letter. It was my maternal grandparents. On my mother's side, my grandfather was American and my grandmother was Japanese. My mother spent her early years in America, but with an interest in Japanese culture, she came to Japan to study in her college years. That's where she met my father and got married. However, their marriage was not easily accepted. My grandparents strongly wished for her to stay in America and were against the marriage. The two eloped and couldn't even come to Japan until they heard the sad news of the passing of both. To be honest, we had forgiven them a long time ago, but we didn't know how to face them. I really regret being such a stubborn fool. If I had known this would happen, I would have welcomed their marriage. Upon hearing of their death from an acquaintance, the two were filled with sorrow and seemed to regret their actions. They blamed themselves for their passing. While I was lost in these thoughts, it seemed that same acquaintance told them about me, their grandchild. They were worried about how I was doing, and they had also heard that I was pregnant. It might be hard for you to accept us, considering what we did to your parents. But please understand, we are always on your side. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I promise to protect you no matter what. If things get tough, don't ever think you're alone, okay? You can always depend on us without hesitation. Tears welled up in my eyes instantly as my grandmother Eleanor softly gripped my hand, her warmth comforting. After struggling long to protect the child in my belly, their warmth revived the numb feeling in my heart. Seeing me sob like this, my grandparents were both surprised and gentle, inquiring with concern about what had happened. When they learned of my current situation, they were furious and entrusted me with something. "You don't have to endure such a life any more. We will help you. Please let us. All you need to think about is yourself and the baby. Don't worry about finances. Take care of yourself." Encouraged by their supportive voice, I decided to get a divorce. I vowed to exact revenge on my husband. However, before I could act, it was James who made the first move. As soon as I returned to our house, an enraged James confronted me with the letter from my grandparents. "What is this letter?" "What? You went through my desk without permission?" "It's my house. I can do whatever I want." "Even if it's your own house, there's something called privacy. What's with you today? You seem different, talking back to me like that." I truly believe his ability to detect even the slightest change in me is remarkable. However, even if he read the letter, it wasn't a big deal. The letter only mentioned the existence of my grandparents, and there wasn't any particular issue with it. Yet, James used that letter as a reason to suggest divorce. "I bet you lied about meeting this old geezer and old lady in the letter. You went back to your hometown to date some guy, didn't you?" "What?" "Don't think you can fool me with such an obvious lie. I know you've been using the internet or some trick to have fun behind my back. You're a cheater." "Wait a minute. How did you come to that conclusion? You know best that I don't have time for such things, don't you?" I couldn't comprehend his absurd insinuations. My stomach hurt and headache. It was just too much. "You've never done anything like that before. Do you think you can deceive me with such an obvious lie? Don't underestimate me." He wasn't listening at all. I felt a sense of discomfort towards James, who was trying to trap me with such an excessively forced excuse. "I'm disappointed in you." Not that I had much expectation to begin with. So what? Normally, at this point, one would present evidence of their innocence, providing that what James was saying was absurd. However, I, who was contemplating divorce, thought differently. I deliberately let James continue, wanting him to utter the next words. "Let's get a divorce. Our marriage was basically out of mutual interest anyway. You've grown fat and unattractive. Raise the kids yourself. I don't want anything to do with you anymore." He got exactly what he wanted. I pulled out the divorce papers he had left, and presented them to James. "Great. Here's the divorce papers. Sign it and I'll take it tomorrow, before you change your mind." "Why do you have this?" "I'm your housekeeper. Clean the house. Finding something like this is a piece of cake." "That's a lie." The truth is, I had noticed the divorce papers he left on his desk as a threat long time ago. "I can dispose of you any time." He subtly conveyed that to me from a distance, making sure I lived in fear of him. So I wouldn't retaliate. I lived every day in fear of that single piece of paper. "You're quite confident all of a sudden. Can you, with zero life skill, really survive without me?" "Don't underestimate me. I won't rely on someone like you anymore. I will protect my child with my own strength." In reality, it was a gamble. I was anxious inside, wondering what would happen if James suspected my sudden boldness. However, I had a hunch about why James proposed the divorce at this time. Therefore, I knew that he would not retract his divorce proposal, and that this situation was also favorable for him. "Oh, really?"
Then raise that kid on your own. Since we're divorcing on mutual terms, I won't have any involvement with you or the child. That kid isn't mine, and you don't ever come in contact with me. Promise." "Fine. This is goodbye." Thus, when I was about 9 months pregnant, I divorced James. I had some saving from when I was single, so I could quickly pack my belongings and leave his house. As planned, I headed to my grandparents' place, settling some matters there. Later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy, my first child. I named him with hopes for his strong and resilient growth. My son grew up so fast, and both of my grandparents and I enjoyed watching him grow, living fulfilling days. 3 months later, I received a call from an unknown number. As I picked up the call, my expression turned sour. "What the hell is going on? Explain." His shrieking voice was so high-pitched I almost wanted to retort. Initially, I thought it was a woman who was calling me. I instinctively pulled the receiver away from my ear. The discomfort grew just hearing that voice, echoing inside my head. I wanted to end the call immediately, yet, as I continued to listen, he rattled on. "You established a company? I never heard of this. Where in our marriage life did you stash away that kind of money? That money is mine. Return it right now." "You deceitful woman!" Obviously, the voice belonged to James, who had somehow learned about my new company. "Do you think someone's pilfering your money?" He started berating me, hurling words at me like a debt collector. I let out a sigh of disbelief at James' viewpoint without hearing any context, but I replied to him with utter calm. "Oh, what basis are you calling this a scam? There's no evidence that I stole your money." "Shut up, you're cunning. You probably took extra living expenses from me and secretly saved it." "Even if that were true, there's no way I'd have saved enough to start a company. The living expenses you gave me barely covered a month's worth." "Don't be ridiculous." "Then how did you get so much money? There's no job that would have given you such an income when you were unemployed living with me." "You just didn't know. I had assets worth $1.1 million right before our divorce." "What? 1.1 million?" Shocked by the revelation from me, James' voice rose in surprise. Stunned by the unbelievable fact, he choked on his words. "Well, how did you get that much money?" "The elderly couple you talk about are my maternal grandparents. They are the chairpersons of a globally renowned computer software company. Before divorcing you, I met them and received a bank book they had been saving for me. They always set money aside for their future granddaughter." "What?" He must have been completely taken aback. It was easy to imagine him being utterly astonished. Right after our divorce, I immediately proceeded with the change of the account names. My grandparents, who live in a distant country, have limited time when they come to my country. There was a need to hurry for smooth processing. Thankfully, the name changes was completed on the day they arrived in Japan, and I was able to access the money. My mom told me that my grandparents passed away when I was little. I didn't know that they had eloped. When they found out, I thought they were deceased. They must have thought it would sadden me. They kept quiet. But after my parents died, they reached out, learned about my situation, and decided to support me. They promised to take care of me. Upon learning the truth behind our divorce, James was furious. He started spouting words that made him seem hypocritical given that he was the one who had rashly decided on the divorce. If I had known that, I wouldn't have divorced you. You have some nerves. You never tried to understand my situation. That's because you're terrible at explaining things. Is that why you're constantly fighting with your new wife? Trying to shift the blame, as always. How do you know that? Probably not expecting that I knew about his personal matters. James seemed lost for words. His frantic reaction was rather amusing. You think I wouldn't notice? It's obvious. We work together. I didn't need to dig for information. The secret came to me. But don't worry, I'm genuinely relieved that you are marrying the boss's daughter. There's no chance of us remarrying, and I don't have to deal with you anymore. You don't have to be so harsh. We used to love each other. We can still reconcile, can't we? What? What are you talking about? I responded coldly, not even trying to comprehend what he meant. He seemed taken aback by the lack of warmth in my words. James remained silent, struggling to find the right words. Who said I want to get back together with you? I felt relieved after our divorce. I have a child now, and my grandparents have been so kind. I've finally found my happiness. Let your wife deal with your nonsense. I don't want anything to do with you. Having regained my emotions, I recalled the painful days with James, and the anger I had suppressed exploded towards him. Hearing my words, James flinched, probably realizing that I had lost all affection for him. However, he started offering different terms. Well, can you give me some money then? She's incredibly high maintenance, and I barely have any spending money left. She's demanding, selfish, can't do housework properly, and she goes out almost every night. You have 1 million, right? Can you spare me? Don't be ridiculous. I don't have a single penny left for you. Stop saying such things for your convenience. What? James, shocked by my statement, let out a surprised exclamation. I used all the money to establish my company and buy a new house. I don't have 1.1 million left. I'm sorry for nothing. I had expected James to find out about my situation somehow, and considering his greedy nature, it was predictable that he'd come asking for money. That's why I thought of converting my money into fixed assets. So I quickly bought a new house, used most of the funds to establish a nursing facility with a nursery, and spent the rest of the house. Thanks to the move, the facility is quite popular. It's loved by mothers in the same situation as me. It's fully equipped and staffed to ensure single mothers can live independently. I got advice for the company's website and systems from my grandparents and did a lot of research myself. Using social media, I thoroughly researched what's necessary for work. I found out what single parents want in a workplace, what kind of jobs are in demand, and established my own company to fulfill all these needs. I can't believe you're running such a successful business. I was always so irritated by your condescending attitude. Now I can tell you. You thought you could do anything and saw me as trash, but you were so wrong. Hope you regret leaving me for the rest of your life. Though your regret won't change anything. Wait, Catherine. Please give us another chance. I'll do anything you want. Kneel, clean your house, anything. You must be joking. I never get back with you, even if it kills me. Live happily with your current wife, and please, never show up to tell my son you're his father. After that, it seemed like he was shouting something, but I unilaterally ended the call. I blocked his contact and renewed my number. When I told my grandparents about the contact from James,
They arranged everything from security cameras at my home, attempting to ensure he couldn't approach me. "If you want, we can even get you a bodyguard," they offered, showing an overly protective stance, which made me smile with appreciation and mild embarrassment. Since then, James has been consulting his married life with the CEO's daughter. It's said that he's being dominated and drained of his own salary, and every time I hear stories about him from my former colleagues, he feels like whiskey tastes better. Colleagues who heard the story from me began to disdain him, and it became evident to others as well. Eventually, James earned a reputation at work as the unfaithful man. As a result, his standing in the company plummeted. It's said he's continuing his job under much stress and constraint. He's the husband of the CEO's daughter after all. He's probably living a hellish life, unable to resign even if he wants to. Colleagues would joke, and I'd join in the laughter in agreement. Thus, I finally regain a peaceful life. My son, showered with love from his great-grandparents, is growing up healthily. It's almost 10 years since he's born, and I've taught him everything about James without hiding any details. I won't become a man like that, don't worry. I'll always protect you, Mom, he'd say, making me swoon with his prince-like words every day. You can't even do household chores, so we might as well divorce. And you better give me assets too. As soon as he entered the hospital room, Tom said this to me with a smirk. Even though I was connected to many tubes, a girl I didn't recognize stood by his side. Tom doesn't know that I have assets worth $6 million. He should understand that a divorce in this situation would be a matter of life and death for a housewife like me. Fine. Here's the divorce papers. I couldn't be with a man who verbally abused his wife in such a state. I pulled out the divorce papers I always carried with me and handed them to Tom, grinning. He accepted them. "Now I can say goodbye to you. I'll be happy with her, so don't worry. Right, Catherine?" Saying this, Tom wrapped his arm around that girl's waist. That girl, referred to as Catherine, leaned on Tom and sneered at me. "Take care, missus." "Oh, you're not missus anymore. Take care, ma'am." At her words, the two of them left the hospital room laughing, but their happiness would only last for now. Alone in the room, I laughed out loud. Today is Friday, so the divorce will be processed on Monday. Oh, I cannot wait for 3 days from now. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm a 45-year-old housewife. My family run a regular farm. I don't have any particular skills, but the one thing I'm proud of is my vast cooking repertoire. My husband, Tom, is the same age as me, and we were college classmates. Both of us came to New York from the countryside. Since we both lived alone, I used to cook various dishes to Tom using the vegetables and rice sent from my family. People often said I had captured his heart through his stomach, and I was aware of that. Tom was and still is incapable of doing any household chores. I've been taking care of him since we were dating, and after getting married, I continued to handle all household tasks. Sadly, we were not blessed with children, but we enjoyed our life together as a couple. We both loved to eat, and on Tom's days off, we'd often go on drives for small trips just to enjoy delicious food. When we first got married, Tom was kind, but about 3 years in, he became quite controlling. While he never laid a hand on me, His remarks became curt, and he would often say, "Whose money do you think we're living on?" It would be a lie to say those words didn't hurt, but I didn't have the energy to fight back, assuming he wouldn't listen anyway. Because I was a full-time housewife, I felt inferior and couldn't stand up to him. Tom joined a renowned company after graduating from university, but he resigned after about 5 years. He quickly found new jobs, but would resign from them after short periods. Because of this, our income was unstable. We managed by searching money-saving tips, but often struggled with our finances. However, at the company he'd been with for the past 2 years, he seemed to get along with his colleagues. I had faint hopes that he might work there for a long time. Then, one day, Tom came home earlier than usual. "I'm home. I quit my job." "What? Again?" Unintentionally, I voiced my surprise, causing Tom's eyebrows to twitch. In a panic, I stopped cooking and rushed over to him. "I'm sorry, I was just shocked." "Huh? No welcome back greeting, and you're criticizing what I do. You've become quite audacious." At Tom's words, I stiffened. Tom was in a very bad mood today. If I misspoke, it could escalate into something worse. "I'm sorry. As long as you understand." It seemed my apology had somewhat placated him. With a display of his displeasure, Tom sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly placed the beer and glass on the table. "Do you want dinner or bath?" "Food and alcohol." "Understood." To avoid upsetting Tom, I played the role of submissive wife. I once had a strong sense of self, but after 14 years of marriage to Tom, since the age of 28, I rarely showed my true self. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Tom fell asleep snoring on the sofa. The table was so messy it looked like a child had eaten there. I cleaned up the fallen beer bottles and the food scraps scattered on the floor. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Recalling my dreams of a happy married life from my girlhood days, my true feelings slipped out. I glanced at Tom suddenly, but he showed no signs of waking. Relief washed over me, but I also felt dread about continuing this life. Perhaps I should consider divorce. I began mentally organizing my schedule for the next day, determined to confront the issues I had been avoiding. The next day, Tom started visiting the employment office and quickly secured another job. While he was job hunting, I went to the city office and signed divorce papers. I wasn't ready to submit them, but I thought having them would be a kind of protection. I hid the signed divorce papers at the bottom of my frequently used bag. If he discovered them, there's no telling what he might say or do. "Hey, where did you wander off to while I was job hunting?" "I went to the stationery store to buy some resumes. Look, I thought you might need them." "Well, aren't you unusually thoughtful today?" Tom, who got home before I did, initially interrogated me suspiciously, but quickly cheered up. I handed him the resumes I had previously bought. After receiving them, Tom said he was going out for drinks with a friend and left. Tom's new job was at a reputable company with a solid salary and better benefits than anywhere he'd worked before. When he got promoted after working there for about 3 years, he happily had a drink at night. I secretly hoped that maybe this time he would work there until retirement. Tom's department seemed to be in sales, and he started to leave home more frequently for evening entertainment. I enjoyed my brief moments of freedom and gathered energy to greet Tom with a smile when he returned. One day, I received a call from my mother after a long time. Hearing her excited story, I was taken aback. $6 million? Yes, 6 million. You know the mountains and lands we owned? We don't need them anymore. We had them appraised, and they are worth 8 million. We only need 1 million to enjoy the rest of our lives. So I think you might want to rethink your life too. My mother was never fond of Tom. She was worried about me, especially after Tom became more and more controlling, preventing me from even visiting my childhood home. I was stunned by the amount she mentioned. Furthermore, I was shocked to learn that when my mother inherited the property from my grandmother, she changed the title to my name, so there were no inheritance taxes. It's better not to tell Tom. But the final decision is yours, she said, hanging up the phone. I felt conflicted between the urge to immediately inform Tom and the desire to live freely with that money. About a week later, I was involved in a traffic accident. Thankfully, my life wasn't in danger, but I'd need to be hospitalized for about a week. After storing my valuables in the hospital's room drawer, I immediately contacted Tom. I'm sorry, I got injured. Huh? What about my meals? I almost sighed up Tom's reaction, prioritizing his meals over my injury, but I continued to explain. It seems I'll need to be hospitalized for a week. I'm really sorry, but could you buy your meals elsewhere until then? Not even preparing meals for your husband. What a lazy wife. Oh, wait there. I'm coming over now. Tom said this and unilaterally ended the call. I was planning to tell him about the inheritance tonight, but now I thought it might be best not to mention it. Looking at all the tubes attached to me during this precautionary examination, I somehow had a feeling, soon enough, I'd come to realize that my intuition was right. You're useless. Can't even do housework. Let's get a divorce. Haha. And you better pay me compensation too. As soon as he entered the room, Tom, with a smirk on his face, said this to me, who was connected to several tubes. Beside him stood a girl I didn't recognize. Tom wasn't aware that my total assets amounted to 6 million. He should know that a divorce under these circumstances would be a life and death matter for me, a housewife. Fine, here's the divorce papers. A man who would hurl abuse at his wife in this condition is someone I'd rather not have. I handed Tom the divorce papers I had kept as a sort of charm. Tom took them with a smug smile on his face. With this, I can finally say goodbye to you. I'm going to be happy with her, right, Catherine? Saying this, Tom wrapped his arm around the girl's waist. The girl named Catherine leaned against Tom and scoffed at me. Take care, madam. Oh, you're not a madam anymore, so take care, old lady. With those words, the two of them left the room, laughing, but their joy would be short-lived. Left alone in my room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers would only be processed on Monday. Oh, I cannot wait for 3 days from now. Just as I had expected, the weekend went by without any contact from Tom, and it was quite peaceful. I was restless, not used to doing nothing since getting married. Every time I became restless, the nurses would tell me to stay calm. Then, on Monday evening, I received a barrage of calls from Tom. I initially ignored them, but after about 30 minutes of incessant ringing, I decided to answer. Could you not be so persistent? Hey, What's the meaning of this? As soon as I picked up, Tom shouted at me. I couldn't help but laugh. Tom seemed infuriated by my laughter and was screaming incoherently. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. The divorce papers aren't being accepted, are they? Tom was fuming on the other side of the phone, huffing and puffing. I continued to chuckle and responded to his complaint. Oh, I had previously filed a non-acceptance notification. Remember how you used to say, let's get divorced every time we had a fight? I thought it wouldn't be good if you filed for divorce on a whim during one of our arguments. Ugh, but I don't need that now. Withdraw it immediately. Tom hesitated for a moment, but then quickly gave another order. But now that things had come to this, I was no longer just going to listen to everything Tom said. I can't do that until I'm discharged. We need to go through procedures at the municipal office. Then discharge now. Don't be unreasonable. His utterly selfish demands made me laugh even more. He probably wanted to register his marriage with Catherine, whom he brought on Friday. Tom was clearly panicking. By the way, was her name Catherine? She's your mistress, right? Hey, that's rude to Catherine. Apologize. She's my new wife. We are not divorced yet. So she's technically your mistress, isn't she? Responding calmly to Tom's nonsensical remarks, Tom made a weird groaning sound. I decided to hit him where it hurt the most. By the way, you'll hear from my lawyer about the division of property. That's right, property. Including the trouble this time. You better share properly. I'm not sure why he misunderstood, but Tom suddenly sounded in high spirits. After all, the responsible party has to pay the compensation. I had always done my household chores diligently, and of course I had never cheated on him. It's clear as a day that Tom is the responsible party. What are you misunderstanding? You're the one who has to give me the assets. What? Tom responded with a voice that genuinely didn't understand. He likely believed that by not taking care of him while I was hospitalized, I would truly be at fault. Even in my parents' age, one wouldn't be deemed at fault for such a reason. As I bitterly thought this, I explained to him patiently. What fault of mine are you talking about? Just to let you know, not being able to do housework because of my hospitalization doesn't make me the one at fault. You've abandoned taking care of me. If you were a child, it would be considered child neglect, but you're an adult and should be able to take care of yourself. That's why it doesn't make me at fault. If I say you at fault, then you're at fault. Even a judge would be shocked by his baffling logic. My mental image of myself took a huge facefall. Was he really taking me so lightly to think such childish reasoning would work? Finally, get it? Don't you know what's legally defined as grounds for fault? Being at fault would mean, for instance, infidelity, like having another woman despite having a wife. That's why Catherine is my new wife, and you're no longer of any use to me. So it doesn't apply, right? What are you talking about? Since you were dating her behind my back, it's clearly cheating. Tom still doesn't seem to understand. He was set on believing that he was right. Either way, please communicate through a lawyer from now on. Goodbye. Hey, Emily! I hung up the phone without listening to Tom's protest. He called multiple times, but when I ignored him, he eventually seemed to give up and fell silent. I was relieved, but the next day, another headache including event occurred. Feeling frustrated by the non-stop ringing from 9 in the morning, I pressed the call button. On the other end, Tom was complaining at me like a machine gun firing. I wasn't quite sure what he was saying at first, but piecing it together, it seemed he was complaining about not being able to withdraw money from a bank account. If it's a joint account, Tom should be able to withdraw without any issue. But if not, I recalled the bank cards and passbooks I had left at home and asked Tom, "Were you trying to take money from my account by any chance?" "Exactly. You're still in the hospital, and I was going to take the money in your account, but the card won't work." Tom, enraged, rumbled on with his unreasonable argument. It seems he didn't understand what I said yesterday. When I was scheduled to be hospitalized for a week, I had called the bank and requested they prevent withdrawals until I could personally handle it after being discharged. It was to prevent Tom, who's reckless with money, from depleting my savings in my absence. My decision was proven right. It's unthinkable to try to withdraw money from the account of an ex-wife you've divorced. However, Tom didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with it and asked me to make a withdrawal immediately. "What are you talking about? We are practically strangers now. Why would I do as you say?" "The fact that you are my wife hasn't changed. Even if we're getting divorced, act like a proper wife and listen to me. We are just not legally divorced yet, but we're already strangers. Got it? Unfortunately, I don't have money to give to strangers." Tom seemed shocked over the phone, since I had never resisted him this much before. But he quickly became assertive again. "Just do as I say. Send the money now. Pay the compensation for not doing housework." Even though he was academically capable when we first met, sadly, he seemed to lack common sense. 17 years into our marriage, it was confirmed that I had made a poor choice in a partner. Tom seemed frustrated that I wasn't giving in. He likely had exhausted his cash on hand and probably dipped into the living expenses I had left at home and from our shared account. I spoke to Tom as if I was talking to a small child. "Listen, I'm no longer your submissive wife. We'll settle the property division through a lawyer later on." "What? You're so insolent. I'm coming over right now. Just wait." Saying so, Tom hung up the phone. "I don't mind if he comes to the hospital, but I've already asked the nurses station not to let anyone in except for my parents, so it's unlikely he'll make it to my room." Tom really did come to the hospital, but as expected, he seemed to have been stopped at the nurses station. My phone kept ringing, but after ignoring it for a while, it switched to messages and my screen was flooded with notifications. I saved all of them as evidence and contacted my lawyer. After a while, it seemed that lawyer had gotten in touch with Tom as the messages stopped coming in. I thought it was the end, but my hopes were about to be dashed. "There's a visitor named Karen. Would you like to see her?" "Karen? Please let her in." Karen was a friend who shared my hobbies. Back when I was single, we became close after she responded to my posts on a social media platform where I kept records of my dining experiences. We discovered we lived nearby and often went out to eat together. After getting married, while I couldn't dine out as much due to saving money, we kept in touch by regularly meeting for tea and chats. "Emily, are you okay from the injury?" "Yes, I'm feeling much better now, thank you." As Karen immediately expressed her concern upon entering the room, I felt a warmth in my heart. I realized that since my hospitalization, aside from my parents and the hospital staff, no one had shown concern for me. "Hey Emily, things are tough for you right now, aren't they?" "Huh? Why?" I hadn't told anyone about my situation other than my parents. I wondered how Karen knew and asked her, intrigued. Karen then said something shocking. You know Catherine, the young girl, right? She's having an affair with your husband, isn't she? What? How do you know about... Wait, you know her? Actually, she's my niece. I was so surprised at Karen's hesitant answer that I couldn't close my mouth. Who would have thought that Karen was Catherine's aunt? The room went silent. It was the first time there was silence when Karen was around, and it made me feel uneasy. You see, Catherine suddenly told her mother, my sister, that she's getting married. And what's more shocking is that her partner is 45 years old. When I saw the photo, it was your husband. I was so surprised. I've already told my sister. I'm so sorry for all the trouble my niece has caused you, Emily. Don't apologize, Karen. It's not your fault. Karen looked like she was about to cry. I'm thinking of demanding compensation from Catherine. I can't compromise on that. But if I do, does this mean our relationship will end? Of course not. I want to continue being friends with you, Emily. I'll make sure Catherine pays the compensation. Neither my sister nor I can forgive what she's done. We'll keep a close eye on her. I was very grateful for Karen's words. We've been friends for over 20 years. I didn't want to lose a precious friend because of my terrible husband and his mistress. I've scheduled a meeting with them tomorrow, and I'd like you to come with me. Of course, I'll be there. And I can also provide photos as evidence of their affair. The next day, fresh from being discharged from the hospital, I went to a private restaurant room with my lawyer. Tom and Catherine had already arrived and were indulging in an expensive traditional meal. I was speechless at the audacity. You finally made it. Did you bring the money? Remember you are paying for this meal? Tom said this to me without even stopping his meal. Catherine, beside him, continued to eat with a smirk on her face. I decided to fight back. Please handle the payment yourselves. Moreover, I came here to demand for sharing the assets from the two of you. How long are you going to sulk? You're really unattractive. Ignoring Tom's rude remarks, my lawyer and I took our seats and showed evidence proving Tom was at fault. We first presented legal documents regarding the reasons for liability, followed by documents on property division. Lastly, we showed the photos given by Karen, which showed Catherine and Tom, as well as Catherine with an unknown man entering a hotel. Wait, why? Hey, Catherine, what is this? Tom and Catherine were visibly shaken by the photos, and they finally stopped eating. Just then, Karen made her timely entrance. I took those photos. What? Karen? Catherine seemed confused as to why her aunt was present. Karen, with the cold eyes, looked down on Catherine and Tom and calmly spoke about being friends with me for 20 years and how their actions were utterly despicable. Also, Catherine, you mentioned that the baby you're carrying is his, but given your actions, who knows who the father is? Wait, no, I was hearing about her pregnancy for the first time, and judging by her appearance today, one would never guess she was pregnant. However, judging by Tom's reaction, it seems she did claim to be pregnant. So you're pregnant. In that case, after a DNA test, I'll demand an additional penalty. No, I'm sorry. I lied about the pregnancy. Please forgive me. Catherine suddenly admitted this and bowed deeply. She had been searching for a wealthy old man, and Tom was the wallet she got. He bought her designer goods, and she was promised a life where she wouldn't have to work and could do as she pleased after marriage. She believed she could be a housewife and occasionally have flings with men of her choice. She had once lied about being pregnant because he showed no signs of wanting to divorce. Tom froze with his mouth agape when he heard this. "I'm truly sorry, but I can't give you anything. I don't have the money." "I'll pay Emily in advance. You're going to work part-time diligently every month and repay me. You won't have any time for leisure until you paid me back in full." "Oh no." Catherine was utterly disheartened. Karen mentioned she'd bring Catherine again later for another apology and took her out of the restaurant. Tom was in shock the entire time, but seemed to snap back to reality and approached me in a flattering tone. "Look, it seems I was deceived. I can live with that Emily, right? We still have the divorce papers here. Can we start over? You've always been a housewife, so you can't possibly work now, can you?" I listened to Tom's pleas with a cold gaze, none of which moved me. However, I waited for him to finish before answering with a smile. "I can live just fine without you. I'll be taking the divorce papers and filing them shortly. Also, I never mentioned this, but my personal net worth is currently around 6 million, so I can live comfortably without working for the rest of my life. Rest assured." 6 million? Why did you keep such a fortune a secret? "I was about to tell you when you started making a fuss about divorce. I'll definitely get some of your assets, and this money is my personal inheritance, so it doesn't count towards marital assets. It has nothing to do with you, right?" Tom looked at me with a face of utter despair. My lawyer quickly produced some documents and a pen for Tom to sign. The lawyer and I then left and immediately filed for divorce, ending our almost 20-year marriage. Later, Catherine transferred some of her money to my account. According to Karen, upon learning of this incident, Catherine's mother was furious. She made Catherine take a leave from university and work non-stop at a relative's inn until she repaid the compensation. Tom, on the other hand, was disowned by his in-laws after they learned about the divorce. He was told he wouldn't receive any assistance, so he reluctantly took out a loan and paid me in one lump sum. Furthermore, it was revealed that he had been with Catherine at a hotel during work hours. He was fired from his job and is now juggling multiple construction jobs to repay his debts. As for me, even after receiving such a large sum, I didn't know what to spend it on, so I donated half to charity. I then moved to the countryside with the remaining money, and am now enjoying a luxurious single life. I've continued my relationship with Karen. On our days off, we go on food tours and short trips. We both plan to stay single, so I suggested maybe we should share a room. Initially hesitant, Karen agreed when I mentioned we could share deliveries and she could join my meals. I am excited as the moving preparations will start next week. I want to live my life joyfully and true to myself from now on.